We are back. Another episode of Dynasty Theory. I'm John Bauer. Find me on Twitter at the Bauer Club. I'm joined by Dan Lamagna at FF Coach Dan on Twitter. What's up, Dan?
JB, it is great to see you. Excited for tonight's show. But my opening comment's going to be a little different tonight. I have been thinking about you for a week and a half. Listeners, don't think that's strange. There's a method to my madness. Been meaning to bust you. I think the number one Bauer that I now follow in social media may not be John Bauer. I'm thinking you are a very humble man, because I'd be bragging a lot. And I'm also thinking you might have some like insight in the season, because I'm going to share this. I'm not being a stalker either. This is just, you scroll on your Facebook and we've known each other for a few years. But here is Nicole Bauer in Pittsburgh Steelers Stadium, Women of Steel on that big Jumbotron back there, doing all these cool promotions. Like, JB, I am getting some more fantasy tips, I think, following Nicole Bauer than John Bauer possibly. Is this true?
It might be the case. It might be the case.
I mean, will she be talking to the Rooneys and Coach Tomlin and maybe give us a little insight on how that O-line's progressing for Najee, or like?
We'll see. We'll see what information she can give us. You say it's me being humble. It's just me creeping in the shadows now that my sister has cast on me here in the Bauer family. But yeah,
sibling rivalry.
She's enjoying it over there so far. She's enjoying it.
Kudos to her, man. Kudos to her. Serious congrats.
Tonight, we want to talk about quarterbacks. The critical leader of the offense here. And for many situations, the leader of our Superflex dynasty teams. I don't know about you, Dan, but for me, I have across my whole portfolio one quarterback league, and it was an orphan that I happened to take over and, seeing it through. So I'm still around, but that's one out of, however many leagues I'm in at this point. And I think a lot of the people that listen to the show, I'm not saying they're entirely super flex or two quarterback leagues, but I would say most of the leagues that people are in. So tonight's episode is going to be extremely critical when we break down quarterbacks and we continue this rookie talk series leading up to the NFL draft.
I'm with you, JB. I think you described 1% of your roster percentage of one quarterback leagues as we dominate Superflex and Dynasty. Really believe that's the way to go. And even my home drafts have adapted Superflex in the past year or two. So I am 100% two quarterback Superflex formats.
I keep trying to push. I've mentioned my home leagues, my home redraft leagues a few times throughout the last couple of years. And one, I can't get rid of defense and kicker. And it was very quickly vetoed, but I said, what do you guys think about Superflex? No. So that's still out.
Keep fighting the fight, man. Keep fighting the fight, JB.
I'm trying. So looking at these quarterbacks overall, just like we discussed with running backs, how do you view this class as it stands today? So I want to look at it two ways. How do you compare this class overall leading up to the NFL draft compared to previous years? And I'm kind of throwing you for a loop here because, of course, this isn't on the show notes. I'm always throwing extra wrinkles in there at you, Dan. But leading up to the NFL draft, how do we compare it to previous seasons leading up to the NFL draft? So it's kind of tough because obviously hindsight is our friend. But if you remember last year, people were still talking about Malik Willis, and I had him ranked very highly pre-NFL draft because I believed that what we were hearing and seeing from many people that you would think would be in the know, at least a little bit, still had him mocked towards the end of the first round, worst case scenario. And clearly that didn't happen. So this class leading up to the NFL draft, but then how do you think it's going to play out? If we do like a 1 year look ahead, who really gets you excited and who's going to stand out above the rest?
Yeah. And again, you didn't put in the show notes the trends, but luckily here in Dynasty Theory, we have good notes to reference. And same as when we were talking about the running back position, I look at a 3-year sample size right now, looking back at our, who we liked and where we ranked quarterbacks the past couple of years. this year, I think we're kind of spoiled compared to last year. Like Kenny Pickett was the creme de la creme last year, maybe, and that's not necessarily a lot to get excited about. Although in such a NFL needy league, such a dynasty needy league for quarterbacks, you take what we get. And maybe it was just wishful thinking last year on Malik Willis. If you go back to the 2021 rookie class, I don't think we quite have a Trevor Lawrence, that rare gem. I think we'll get that next year in next year's draft. But 2021 was nice. Yeah, the prospect of Trey Lance, which hasn't quite materialized. Zach Wilson kind of flopped, had some tools. Mac Jones gave us another starter in the mix, but there were some pieces to work with. So I think this year is kind of similar. Maybe I won't get into the rankings yet, JB, but I think it's kind of similar to 2 years ago where we got some guys that we're trying to decipher. I think we've got, an impact player that's safe with a high ceiling. And then I think we got a couple guys that, I'm excited about, but I'm very cautious now, a little scarred from the Trey Lances and the Zach Wilsons of the world.
Now, Trey Lance, I mean, I had him as my quarterback 3 throughout that process, but I'm not going to sit here and say, there's no reason to victory lap because of the injuries and everything he's endured here. So we can sit there and say it's this, that, or the other, but Trey Lance, I'm going to forgive you and anybody else for that miss. So I know my forgiveness means the world to everybody. It's still the Lenten season, right?
You're pretty kind tonight, JB. I haven't seen this side of you lately.
I think I'm too tired to be feisty tonight, but let's see. You'll get me going. Mitch isn't on the show.
It's early.
Mitch isn't on the show, and everybody in the Discord, they're like, Mitch knows exactly what buttons to push. But so there's a comment in the chat. This year feels reminiscent of 2018, and I think to an extent that's a fairly good comparison because you have Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, and then slipping down to the end of the first was Lamar Jackson. We very well could see things play out with 5 quarterbacks land first round of the NFL draft. And I already know I'm a little glitchy. I know I can see the little thing up there. So let me get rid of a few windows here. Hopefully that helps. But I do think it could play out similarly. And maybe Hendon Hooker's the guy that goes towards the very end of the first. We had a Josh Allen go in top 10. Maybe that could be an Anthony Richardson because of the traits, not necessarily the collegiate production, especially throwing the ball, but there are some similarities there. So I think that's a really nice comment there, AJ. All right. I asked you the question and kind of comparing it to the 2018 class. Even at this point last year, we were praying that there were going to be 3 first-round quarterbacks, right? I think that was like best case scenario, what we were really hoping for. But here we are now, 3 weeks away from the 23 draft. If we only get 3 first-round quarterbacks, it would be a great disappointment. It really would. And I talked about Malik Willis being, maybe Dan has some bad news for us here. So maybe that's going to be thrilling for you to come have us crashing back down to earth. Jeez, oh man. But I was looking at some mocks last year, and Daniel Jeremiah, the day before the NFL draft, still had Malik Willis mocked at the end of the first. Wow. So you could sit there and say, well, fantasy folks were really pushing for that. And it wasn't really the NFL minds at work there. But this year, you're seeing a lot of Hendon Hooker creep up into the first. Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, obviously Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. So it's going to be very interesting who we might identify as landmines here because, overall, first-round quarterbacks, top 10 quarterbacks, still maybe about a 50% hit rate. And then it's like, what are we really talking about when we talk about a hit? Because Mitchell Trubisky, for fantasy purposes, through his rookie contract, it was fine. But
he helped it.
He played very well from a fantasy standpoint through that first contract, and then we know how things played out since. But that's what we got to look at when we talk about a hit. Is it the sustained long-term success? Is it cracking top 12 numbers for any given season, or is it, getting that long-term contract? So it's going to be a lot of things to look at, a lot we're going to be discussing tonight. But Dan, your top 5 right now, before we get into more, I would say, strategy and roster construction conversations. How does your top 5 look today?
I'll give you my top 5, and then I look forward to we get into pros and cons to see if Greg stays listening to our show, because he says in the chat he is here for the forgiving, heartwarming JB. I'm not sure if JB will continue down that path tonight, but right now, lock and load, clear number 1 for me is Bryce Young. And then I am like 2A and 2B, and I'll get into it more in the pros and cons between CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson. I think it depends how I'm constructing my teams or what my roster construction looks like. I have Will Levis at 4 and Hendon Hooker at 5.
Well, we right off the bat. I mean, can you tell me, because you are the film guy, and I think with quarterbacks, film possibly one of the more critical positions when you evaluate these guys, but also, and I think this comes into the film evaluation as well, the draft capital is going to be critical. You talk about running backs. Yeah, late first, fantastic. Anywhere in the second, great. Beginning of the third, still good. End of the third, okay. For quarterbacks, we really want top 10. So the NFL, and not to say the NFL doesn't miss, because, oh my gosh, we just said about a 50% hit rate, even on top 10 picks that are spent on quarterbacks. So the NFL certainly has their misses, but, from a film perspective, what stands out to you to differentiate and separate not only having Bryce Young as your quarterback 1, but to sit here, all right, on April 4th and say, not even the same tier as CJ Stroud, because that disappoints me. And maybe my forgiveness is out the window at this point.
We'll see. And JB, I might let you argue a little bit more. And without me throwing the red challenge flag tonight, I have a higher hit rate at running backs in fantasy than I do quarterbacks. So I might be more aligned with the National Football League. For me with Bryce Young, and this is where maybe you could holler at me, although you're saying CJ Stroud instead of Anthony Richardson. So I think that's a little bit interesting too. I look at Bryce Young as more of a complete package. I love the way he steps up in the pocket and makes all these different level throws, just all the high IQ things, the Alabama system, a little bit more success out of Alabama quarterbacks than Ohio State quarterbacks. I know size is a little bit of a concern, but if they keep him healthy and they protect him, I think he's the kind of kid that could overcome that. And if I'm running a pro style offense, he could do it all for me. He could run. He could move up in the pocket. He could get out of the pocket. He can make all the throws. I just think he does more and is less of a system quarterback and more of a complete quarterback that's got that it factor that's going to be special in the NFL. And I think I'm going to get earlier production out of him and more long-term production out of him, where I might have to be a little bit more patient with CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson and just have a little more risk.
So many questions are popping into my head right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure I'm going to lose my train of thought. It happens every single show. First off, you mentioned the size, and that's, it's been talked about for several years now. You look at it from a Devi standpoint. I know a lot of great analysts and folks, personalities, content creators, whatever phrase you want to throw around, have been talking about this for several years. So this isn't anything new. Do you think it's more critical for Bryce Young than any of the other prospects here that the top 5, it's more critical for him to go into a situation that has a better offensive line in place?
I think it is important because you obviously got to protect the kid. We don't want to see him be like Joe Burrow and getting sacked 50, 60 times, and then it becomes a factor. So it is from a health perspective.
Is it more important for him than the other prospects we're going to talk about tonight?
from a staying healthy perspective, I mean, I say yes, not heavily, not to the point where I'm scared about it. I think the expectation is the coaching staff gets him. They make sure the O line's building around him. And if right now what we're hearing is true, and Frank Reich likes taller quarterbacks, and more people seem to be saying CJ Stroud is going to go number 1 to Carolina. So then you look at Bryce Young, number 2 to Houston, who is building an offensive line, putting that money into Tunsil. They've got some, they need to help. They need to get him help at wide receiver. But I think that's an organization that's got the resources and the draft capital to build that O-line quicker and some cap space, as they're going to have Young on a rookie contract. That I think he's going to be okay, JB. I mean, as long as it's not an O-line that's like, again, giving up 50 sacks, then I'm worried. If not, I think he's a smart kid. He's going to get rid of the football. They're going to protect him, and I think he'll be okay. So I'm not being scared away by that size.
No, but now here's the thing. As I always do, playing a little bit of devil's advocate, because I do want to get in the mind, as scary as this could be, get in the mind of Dan Lamani here and figure things out at the quarterback position. But you mentioned Bryce Young to Houston, and this isn't, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent. There are so many smoke screens right now, and it seems like it's happening more and more every single year with the growth of social media. Now there's and I use this term loosely, a report that, hey, Houston might be okay passing on a quarterback at 2, and they might be okay. Maybe they look somewhere else. Or, I mean, and you just, I've seen reports saying Carolina likes 17 different quarterbacks at the first overall pick. Your name was mentioned, Dan, sneaking in there with the first overall pick. It's just, but I think when we're doing this, keep an open mind, because a lot of people, they're going to be sitting there saying, well, my evaluation of the player partly is going to be based on where they are going. Nobody knows where these guys are going, and especially with more and more false information, maybe being leaked on purpose or inadvertently, just some thoughts. Hey, but also it's when these articles come out, or these headlines come out, dig into more than just the headline. I know there's certain sites that, Dan Lamagna said this. Well, did he really say that? Can we pull the full quote? I'd be interested in seeing that. So things like that.
JB, like with Bryce Young, I'm a little less concerned where he goes, and I don't want to be that fantasy owner that's like watching him sling the ball all over the field because I didn't take him because I had some apprehension about his size. If he goes first to Carolina, let's say they don't go in the Stroud direction, then it's like, okay, hey, Frank Wright, an organization that does have some talent, this might progress a little bit quicker for Young. If he goes to Houston, number 2, I really like him on the turf with a team that, again, could draft another receiver with their next pick in the first round. They've got, Pierce in the backfield. They got some pieces to, move this along. I think they got a better coaching staff than they've had in years. I'm optimistic on D'Amico Ryans there. And then skip the dysfunction of Arizona. They're not doing anything with Murray. They might trade out of that pick, but the further it would slide, like to your point, JB, say Houston says, for some reason we're going to stay dysfunctional and stay with Davis Mills, then he's probably sliding to even better organization. Like, hey, go to the Colts with Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman and Jelani Woods and my boys. They're, I think, going to move that in a better direction there, hopefully in Indianapolis, or go to a team that could groom him. There's just opportunities there where he's going to go with more talent. So I'm all in on Bryce Young.
Yeah. So I think size really being the biggest con for him. And you mentioned the pros and just what he brings to an organization and the leadership. And I mean, so polished. There's no doubt about that. With CJ Stroud, what cons are you looking at specifically? You mentioned that about 5 minutes ago that CJ Stroud might not give you the immediate production that a Bryce Young could, and very well might not give you the longer term production that a Bryce Young could.
Yeah, I'm a little snake bitten, fool me once, fool me twice. We know that saying. I don't want to go on the Ohio State, Kool-Aid again here. And because I do think there is a bit of a system there that just helps him. The Ohio State quarterbacks historically, you get those plays from the sidelines. They got a very good offensive line and some of the best wide receivers in the world, and they capitalize on that. Now, I do watch his film, and I see he could make all the throws similar to Bryce Young at different levels of the field. So I enjoy watching his film. I watched him compete like an animal against Georgia, and it seems like in those bowl games in recent years, like last 5 years for Georgia, and they've had some good defenses. Those quarterbacks that were able to go toe to toe for the Bulldogs have done pretty decent in the NFL, whether it's from Bama or wherever. So I like him. I just feel safer and more confident in Bryce Young. I just think has more of the it factor. I'm a little more shy to go down that Ohio State road again.
All right.
And I think Bryce Young protects the ball more. Like when you look how they do handle pressure and how they've handled different situations, ball security is an important thing in the NFL. I just feel like Bryce Young, safer floor, higher ceiling, and that trumps him over Stroud for me. And I'm really struggling whether I like Stroud or the just potential eye candy of Anthony Richardson. So I did say it's 2A, 2B for me with that next quarterback pick.
Well, let's get into Anthony Richardson then, because first comment here from Greg. What is the likelihood that Anthony Richardson sits, or are those days of sitting a first rounder gone? Let the kid play. It's not a Hendon Hooker situation where he's coming off an injury, bring him along slowly, especially if Hooker would slip to the end of the first or creep up to the end of the first, whatever way you want to look at it. Let Richardson play, depending on the team that he goes to. Let's say he would go to like a Washington. What's the point in having him sit behind Jacoby Brissett and Sam Howell? You know very well what Anthony Richardson is bringing to you, and it is just a level of excitement and the dynamic playmaking and the raw traits that none of these other guys really can give you to that extent. Are there things that need to be improved on? Sure, but he still gives you that electric playmaking ability. And if you're going to, maybe he does slip outside of the top 10, but if you're going to use a top 10 pick on the kid, put him in, let him play. That's my thought.
Yeah, I agree, JB. Like he has the tools to play in the National Football League now. Like not even just the running, which is off the charts, but he does make some impressive throws. Like there's a rocket arm there. It's just consistency. Learn how to read NFL defenses. It's not going to be as easy as it was in Florida, which he didn't really excel consistently in the passing game anyway. But if you do like traits and tools and talent and see the upside and say, hey, you know what? We could slowly roll this kid in. And when I say that, I don't mean let him sit a whole season, but we could keep the offense very vanilla, play action, roll outs, establish the run game, utilize his legs. He's got that ability, and then slowly bring it up. Maybe he sits a few games early in the season. You look at these teams that have, the Andy Daltons, the Case Keenums, the Gardner Minshews. He might watch him for a game or two, like learning game preparation. Hey, how do you prepare for your first NFL game of the season instead from instantly out to the Wolves? But I'd say at the latest game 3, game 4, you see him in there and he's in there the rest of the way.
Yeah, again, what he is bringing to your organization if you're going to spend an early draft pick on him. I think for him, it's going to be a kind of thing where it's great until it's not. You're going to have electric plays, and then you're going to have a play where it's like, what did we just watch there? Was that really a top 10 pick? And you know what? This is no joke. I thought about this earlier today because this is how my mind works. Just completely going on tangents and bringing different things in. On Facebook, Dan and I are going to sound like dinosaurs right now. They're always throwing out those like promoted videos from these different accounts. And there was a video that popped up for me the other day. And the algorithm, they must really know me because I think one of I have sat there and watched videos of two animals of different species, like becoming unlikely of best friends. Hold on. I'm going to get there. Hold on. And this video was a tiger and a dog that have seemingly become best friends. Listen, they sit there, they wrestle around, they lay with each other. Adorable. But you know what? Hold on. You know what? It's glorious until it's not, and the tiger looks at that dog as dinner. That's what we're looking at with Anthony Richardson here. It's gonna be beautiful. Oh my God, we could watch this all day until it's not. Until the tiger eats the dog, and that's gonna be Anthony Richardson throwing a pick six. Boom, other way.
First, I might have to take a road trip to Pittsburgh and have an intervention this summer and like talk to Mrs. Bauer. Like, what is John watching on Facebook? Let me start there. But yeah, but then on the flip side, JB.
Wait, really? You've never watched like a video of like an elephant and a bird?
I mean, maybe JB, if like I think my mother-in-law once showed me like eagles hatching eggs or something. I might have saw something, but I don't think so. But JB, what if he is that tiger? People are listening to this episode right now and they're like, what kind of analogy? What is John? I think everyone in our Discord is gonna be worried about you tonight, JB. But that's you're one with nature, though. You're one with nature, so you're diverse. I give you credit.
But look, my glasses are steaming up because I'm dying over here.
We're gonna need Rich's take on that. But what if Richardson is that tiger? Like this kid. Like, could you? I could just picture myself regretting not having him in fantasy. Like even Justin Fields, who still can't throw the ball consistently himself, a few years into the NFL, is a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Like, and I watched him run last year. Like, holy cow! He like the second half of the season, the Bears figured enough out to free him up. Now I felt bad because the kid almost went out in like a stretcher because he took so many darn hits. Richardson's more of a runner than he is. Could he just throw enough and then continue to progress like the Lamars of the world? Like he's got every tool you need to be able to. That's your favorite word, tool. He's got all the tools, JB.
Tool.
I'm just pronouncing it different.
He's got all the tools. I don't know how I pronounce it. So that kind of goes into upside. I think again, this is not a revolutionary insight in terms of saying Anthony Richardson has an extremely high ceiling. If he is playing, I think he's got the highest floor out of everyone too. But here's the thing with the floor. And here when you're looking at it, yeah, he has a high floor. But if you look out 3 years, who has the highest likelihood of bottoming out to zero? If you're looking at those three strictly, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, I don't know how you can't say it's Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. I wish we had one more year sample size of him in college because I think it would become a no-brainer. And that's probably why he's 2B, just because of that risk. The tiger and the dog, a heartwarming chronicle of fantasy football friendship. God, I love Greg's comments. Oh man, so that might be the headline when you post on Twitter. Share this.
I don't know. But, I'm losing my mind.
But like, look at Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. Like, why can't he be that so easily? And that's what makes me say, depending on my roster construction, I could see me taking him ahead of a Stroud, and I could see him being better than Bryce Young. Bryce Young, I feel, is just safer. Like, I think he's going to land in that, like, Bryce Young, that like Tua, Dak, like in the top 12, but maybe the later half of it, where Richardson could easily catapult himself up with that running fantasy upside to, as an average thrower, being a top fantasy weapon.
Nick, and you might have jumped on late here. He says, weren't we doing this last year talking about Malik Willis's athleticism? This is where it's going to be critical as well to let the NFL provide their input, And if Richardson goes end of day 2 or even beginning of day 2, this is a completely different conversation. But again,
JB, the draft capital is a lock for Richardson, where it wasn't for Willis. The conference he played in is a whole other world. And as athletic as Wilson was, Richardson blows him away. Like, you look at their stats, Willis is no Richardson.
You're on point with names tonight.
Yeah, there's a lot of names in my mind here today, but I'm telling you, they're night and day. I wouldn't get caught up in that Malik Willis conversation last year. And I like that Nick brought it up because I have thought it, but when I look at the film, when I look at their measurables, where I look at where they played, where I look at where they're going to go in the draft, there's no comparison.
And I will, and again, I love this comment, but it would lead me to caution everybody. We're talking about Anthony Richardson this way. We were talking about Malik Willis this time last year. Again, talked about mock that Daniel Jeremiah put out the day before the NFL draft last year. Malik Willis still going at the back end of the first in that mock. Don't get caught up on your priors here. If you loved what you saw from Willis last year and then he slipped to the third round, I assure you, there were people still taking Malik Willis at the end of the first round in Superflex rookie drafts. I saw it too many times. Desmond Ridder crept up. And yeah, he might get an opportunity here with Atlanta in 2023. But when the NFL tells us something, and it's not like, one team was significantly higher than the rest of the NFL. So he went early first round, blah, 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 when really everybody else had a second or third round grade on this player, not just quarterbacks, but anybody in general. But when you have 32 teams pass on somebody once, twice, 3 times a lady, then you got to start thinking, okay, maybe our pre-draft evaluation from a fantasy perspective was incorrect. So if this happens with anybody, any of these quarterbacks, if you see Will Levis slip, but you for some reason were very keen on him, Hendon Hooker, Hendon Hooker's current value, when I'm looking at it from a rookie draft perspective, I'm far lower right now because I'm going in thinking he does not get first round draft capital. But guess what? If he does, there will be an adjustment, but that goes both ways. So again, not to go off on a tangent here, but I love the comment from Nick. I think that's a very important talking point because things can change. This is the last piece of the puzzle. NFL teams are, we would like to think they're putting in maybe as much work and time as we are, Dan, maybe if they're on a good day, but use the information they give you, because like we always say, none of us are in those rooms, in those meetings, at practice. So I think that's a good comment.
Yeah, I really struggle with Hendon Hooker. I'm going to bet today he does not go in the first round. And even if he did, I am going to be hesitant to fall into that trap of draft capital. Because this is Dynasty Theory, right, JB? By the time he's recovered from this ACL, he's going to be 26 years old.
He's going to be almost as old as Kirk Cousins.
As you, Dan. He's creeping up on me already, and he hasn't even, oh man, he hasn't even set foot on an NFL field. So what I learned from watching that Tennessee film, maybe it's a teaser for next week. What I learned about that, Hooker in Tennessee is that I love Jalen Hyatt. That's what I learned, man. That's who I'm in love with from Tennessee, not Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting. I mean, the upside is there as well. And you can sit there and say, well, he's going to be 25 years old. He's coming off the ACL injury. But if he creeps into that first round of the NFL draft, then I'm not saying he gets bumped up to an early to mid first round pick in Superflex rookie drafts by any means, but you do have to adjust. And if you believe that he goes day 2, you need to be shifting a little bit. Maybe you don't get all the way up to market, but there needs to be a slight adjustment at least, whatever he does. And if he goes into the first round, I'm sorry, I'm reading AJ's comment. Yeah, but QBs now play till they're 40, Dan. So Hendon Hooker will have 2 years before that point.
If he ever gets on a National Football League field as a starter. But I will adjust a little bit, JB, if he goes first round, just so I could trade him to you. That's what I might do.
Wait, but me saying that's what you took away from that?
I'm just being but I'm out on him. I mean, I got him, and we get to the second round of a rookie draft. He's on my list. He's in the tier. It depends who's there. It depends where he goes in the draft. But again, Dynasty Theory. I know quarterbacks play for a while, but I think part of him is being a product of that Tennessee system. I think he had a really good year last year.
He had a really solid 2 years.
He did, and I think he's going to be a good backup quarterback in the National Football League.
All right, so even with the first round draft capital, he is going to be coming in at quarterback 5 for you. And can I say, even with first round draft capital, he will be my quarterback 5 as well. And that leaves us with Will Levis. I don't think you know what? Where he is valued for me currently, and this, I don't want to get too cross positional with this conversation, but assumed top 10, top 12 draft capital, he's in that 109 to 111 tier for me as it stands today. But that also is with an expectation and a baseline set for every single player in terms of where I believe, based on my research and what you're hearing and from all the NFL talking heads, like I've mentioned a few times, that could shift up a little bit. That could certainly shift back a little bit. So there's always going to be situations where you look at a position and, it happened with wide receivers 2 years ago for me, because that was like the Michael Carter draft class. And even not many guys went day 1 or day 2 at the running back position. So that I had a certain grade on coming out. And because of that, a wide receiver might have been like wide receiver 6 pre and post draft, but they bumped up 3, 4, 5 spots because of the way other positions went. So that is my way of saying Will Levis, something crazy would have to happen for him not to be my quarterback 4. But how things shake out across other positions, he might move up just a smidge, but there's also room for him to move down a little bit. I think when you look at probability and the way the likelihood of outcomes and the range of outcomes, there is most likely a better chance than not that he ultimately ends up being a bust in the NFL.
Yeah, I have such mixed feelings. I have them in the same tier you do, JB. Like that 9 to 11 makes a lot of sense. I think this is where this year's draft for Dynasty falls a little bit short. Like we talked about there being some more depth at running back and tight end, and there's guys that are, have potential and are attractive, but I could also see a lot more busts in that 7th or 12 range this year. It doesn't feel as like lockstep safe as it did previous years. So I think there's a little bit more gamble where, depending on where Levis gets drafted, he could go all the way as high as 7, in my first round rankings. But I do struggle with him. He's got nice size. Reminds me a little bit of Taysom Hill. I don't know if it's because they wear the same number 7 there. Just a big dude runner. He's got a strong arm. But then I think like he was also like left Penn State because he was behind Sean Clifford. I don't know if that's a red flag or if that's like, okay, it was the same thing as like, Justin Fields being behind Jake Fromm in Georgia, just quarterback like how he runs the system.
Joe Burrow transferring.
Yeah, so I'm trying not to let that scare me away, but I'm in Penn State country as are you, JB. I mean, you're a little closer to Pitt, but we're Pennsylvania.
This is not Penn State country.
Well, I know you're a Pitt Panther guy, but Penn State's Pennsylvania, man. Like, come on, JB. Happy Valley. It's the number one school.
I'm not a Flyers fan. I'm not an Eagles fan. Don't project that. Don't project that on me.
Maybe it's the Northeast PA media here in Scranton. They covered like Penn State to nauseum, and like Sean Clifford's never gonna sniff NFL fantasy relevancy, and Will had to leave because he couldn't beat him out. So I worry about that a little bit, but I do like a lot of his film. Again, he does remind me of Taysom Hill. He didn't go away on some military assignment for years. He's not as old as Taysom Hill, but there's some tools, JB. There's some tools there. So anywhere from 7 to 11, I wouldn't argue with.
Wait, this is perfect timing. Mitch just jumps on. Come on, JB. Wait, you said Taysom Hill military assignment, wasn't it and Mitch, what's the verbiage? The uh the uh, uh LDS retreat, not military.
Yeah, I'm saying
He's
he's
building
like a
houses
late
or
bloomer to
something.
fantasy relevancy in the quarterback position, and he's raw. And I don't know. Junior year was a little bit better, but he had some more weapons, and so I have some mixed feelings on him. But potential's there. If I'm a quarterback needy team, I'm willing to roll the dice on him as long as another NFL team is. After him, it falls off for me.
You made a good point, and this is something I actually just did hour and a half ago, and it was stemmed from a conversation in the Discord, the Dynasty Theory Patreon, as little as $5 a month. April is completely free. Come check it out. If you don't like it, you get refunded anyway. Bounce after April, and that's not a late April Fool's prank. Okay, all right, which is probably the worst holiday, and I use air quotes there, of all time. But one thing that I am looking to do, there is and this goes back to early in the off season. You're starting to formulate your rankings and your tiers, and that's why we do a lot of tier based rankings, because it allows you to pick up value within the margins. But you go from, okay, I got 4 guys in this tier, I got 5 guys in this tier. And then as the offseason progresses, we start getting more insight and information and combine results and pro day results and who's really getting hyped from the NFL folks. You start to move these tiers around a little bit. So this is a very long-winded way, and people are thinking, JB, long-winded? No way. But a long-winded way of me saying there is a top 6 right now that I want in 12-team Superflex rookie drafts. There's a top 6, okay? And I moved 108 and 204 to get up to 106 an hour and a half ago. And now you're thinking, hey, I got 4 guys there from 106 to 109 that I really like, so I'm okay moving back. I would pick up the extra second. But once we get into the rookie drafts and you're staring down a Jahmyr Gibbs or a JSN there at 106, or let's say Bryce Young slips in some leagues because people don't know how to value the quarterback position. Now I'm maybe moving up from a Quentin Johnston, who, I was told is going to be a bust because he can't separate, but the sarcasm font there. But if I'm able to move a 204 to make up the ground and get up to a JSN, or a Charbonnet to a Gibbs, there's a clear difference there for me as it stands today. So I'm betting on that staying intact and making the move today, because once we get more, maybe not more separation, but a clear divide between the tiers, it gets more and more difficult. Especially, I say this so many times. Right now, you're like, oh my gosh, there's 24 guys in rookie drafts I would love to have. Well, then landing spot throws out some of those guys at the end of the second. Draft capital, oh, I love Isaiah Spiller. He's going into second round. Boom, 4th round. So now you start to move up into the second. There's a bigger gap there. So I'm not as upset by moving off the 204 to get up into that top 6. And I think that's one thing that, Dan, you and I can agree on here.
Yeah, I love that move, JB, for you. Again, where I look at the past 2 drafts, this again, I stand by. I think this draft falls short and has more risk for bust. So my bet is at least one of those 2 picks are going to bust that you traded, and that 106 is going to be better than that other guy. The ceiling and potential of those top 6 guys, I'm right lockstep with you. Those 6 are locks. And I don't know if does it count as breaking news for Denver Bronco fans that John Elway, the legend in Denver, split from the organization? Is that breaking news? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that might be.
I'm a big John Elway fan historically. Maybe showing my age, one of the greatest quarterbacks ever.
We got Greg, our resident Broncos fan. Let us know.
There's got to be some turmoil there. Coach Payton's, hey, this is my way or the highway. And I don't know if John liked that, but he did say they're in great hands. So he left with some complimentary words.
Yeah. All right. Looking at our 5 quarterbacks here. Oh, that was earlier today, Dan.
Yeah, just got
Earlier
the
today.
message. Just got the memo.
I ignored it because it's not really fantasy relevant, so I don't care. Are there any later guys here? You talk about your top 5. Are there any guys that stand out to you? You know, Brock Purdy, a Davis Mills, guys that are certainly maybe on the radar, but as a late round flyer in your rookie drafts.
I think there could be. I like that we're 45 minutes into the show, and I think that's the first close to a show note that we started with, because you and I think went on a 45-minute tangent because we're pretty passionate about rookie quarterbacks. But if we're looking at a later guy or like that Brock Purdy mold, someone that we're going to take a flyer on in Superflex because we're in the 3rd or 4th round, and we want to get something in our dynasty quarterback room there, I went with Tanner McKee. I feel like he's not being talked about as much as, obviously Hayden Hooker, but he may not be that far off. Bennett specifically, O'Connell after having a good Senior Bowl there. I think he could be potentially better than all of them. He has some more traits to be maybe the good dart throw for a quarterback needy team, could develop into something. So Tanner McKee would be my guy that I'm kind of looking at as a dart throw quarterback that maybe evolves to something. I'm not holding my breath here, though, again, saying he's going to be the next anything, but we have some deeper rosters. It is super flex, on the bottom and back end of our bench. It's worth taking a flyer on him.
Now, these picks that we've discussed earlier here, specifically the top 3 quarterbacks for you, is there a situation where you're looking at these picks when you're on the clock and you're saying, okay, Bryce Young is the top guy on my board here at 102, or Anthony Richardson or whoever, and you're thinking, I'd rather trade out than make this pick on this quarterback. Maybe I go after a veteran. Maybe I go after a veteran plus because I'm a little thin and my depth could use some work. Is there any situation like that? Or are you sitting there saying, I'm on the clock, I want Bryce Young?
I think my mind went tonight where, if I could get Bryce Young, I believe the answer is no. If I need a second quarterback because I only have one and my roster is a contender, I may trade to get a solid number 2 and get off of that, to solidify my season. But I think I would need a second or another player with a vet quarterback if I'm, not getting a future first. If I have 2 quarterbacks, I'd rather the upside of any of the top 3.
And that's a question and a conversation that really could be an entire episode by itself. It really could. Maybe
there's
Mitch
a lot
and
of scenarios.
Yeah, so I throw a very generic question there, a little softball for Dan, knocks out of the park there. One thing you said, and I want to mention this because it's been coming up a lot in the Discord. You see it on Twitter all the time. You see it in group chats. You see it in trade discussions. Hey, I can't move this running back because I need a running back. Or I got to go out and get a running back. It is April 4th. I don't know about you, Dan, but I don't think there's any games. Maybe your XFL this weekend, but we have plenty of time. So when you're approaching this and you're in your rookie drafts, I don't know that it necessarily happens with a Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, or Anthony Richardson, but if you're at 102 and maybe you do have a Jahmyr Gibbs as your number 2, even in super flex leagues. And if you do, okay, that's another conversation. But let's say you do, and you're at 102 and you're like, I'm taking Gibbs because he's my top guy. That's fine. But don't do it because you need a running back in April. Okay. You have plenty of time. Now, your league better than anybody else does, or at least I hope you do. If it's an active league, if managers are a little stingy, if they gravitate towards rookie picks, or there's some leagues where running back is still king and you have to overpay. And if you want to acquire, and it could be at any position, but you need to go into this with an open mind and don't reach on a player strictly because you have a need at the end of April, beginning of May. So I think Will Levis, Hendon Hooker, they're going to be good examples from a quarterback situation where somebody might be sitting there at 106 or 107. And I hope as soon as I say that, you think, oh my God, that I would never do this, JB. But you're sitting there at 107, and instead of taking your top player on the board, you look and say, well, I had Tom Brady on my roster and I need to replace him. I got to get Will Levis here. If he's not your guy, he's not your guy. Approach it differently. Look to move off of that pick for some veterans. If you think the market in your league is shifted that way, maybe look to go another route, move a positional player as you get closer to the season. But just be patient. We have plenty of time before the season rolls around. So that is my disclaimer. And it happens to everybody. I know I certainly look at rosters and I'm like, oh, I would love to shore up this position. And then I got to think, JB, you got 5+ months. Settle down, buddy.
Yeah, I think it's good advice to be mindful that there is plenty of time to address that need. So don't pass up on a great talent. I think it's important to look at who you're passing up. Don't have regrets after the draft because you just filled the need. I'd say it's not like the NFL where, you're going to draft for a need and then you passed up the best player available. As the worst thing to do in the National Football League. It is different for us. I think you could fill a need if you have to, but again, be very mindful of the board, what you could have got for that guy that you passed up. You might be able to draft someone else, trade them, get your need and something. So really be aware of what's available.
All right. We're going to finish tonight's episode. And anything else, not final thought related, but just with these quarterbacks, Dan, that you want to share with our listeners before we get into a little this or that?
It really thins out. So, I think between everything we're reading and seeing and we covered tonight, we cover the heart of the guys and where they're going to, their value is and where they're going to go. There's some dart throws, in Aiden O'Connell, Stetson Bennett, maybe Jack Hayner's the other guy from Fresno State that are like 4th round, or if you have a dynasty league that has 5th round picks, wherever they might fall, maybe a deep bottom of the bench roster.
All right. Well, let's get you started here with, there's only one way to start this. Dak Prescott or 103?
Dak Prescott.
Dak Prescott or 102? So Dak Prescott or for you, Bryce Young?
Dak Prescott.
Is there any, sorry, do you notice I didn't call this rapid fire, so I want to leave some conversation here. Is there any situation? Fair. Is there any situation where you don't take Bijan Robinson 101?
Only if I had a roster that was, again, really solid at running back, and the difference in me winning the year was like, I had Brady retired on my roster. I have one quarterback at best. Like, I've got a couple rosters, JB, that.
Dan, I just talked about this.
Yeah, but JB, probably not JB, but I like Bryce Young. I like, I don't know. I love super flex and stacking up on quarterback, but probably not because he's going to be a Dallas Cowboy. So definitely not if he goes to Dallas. But I never want to say never, JB, depending on roster construction. But no, he's Bijan. I have it here. He's my clear number one.
12-team Superflex. Bijan Robinson needs to be your 101. But you can certainly move off of him if that's the way you want to go. I wouldn't pass on him strictly because you have a need elsewhere. And you could get a quarterback plus. And even if you've tried to move back to 102, 103, 104, and you want to be able to pick up one of those quarterbacks and you haven't been able to, you could get Dak Prescott plus, just using that name there. And I see AJ, we're lockstep here. I'd still take Bijan, then sell him for a quarterback plus. Boom, done. And I don't know why Greg's talking about Colorado. Probably John Elway still. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it was earlier Elway comment. But yeah, I had a moment of weakness. But yeah, Bijan's lockstep number one.
It's all right. That's why we're here. We talk each other through this, Tua or 105?
Tua or 105? I'm still with Tua.
All right, maybe it'll be easier. Tua or Anthony Richardson?
Tua.
Tua or Bryce Young?
I have them right next to each other. I have Tua right before Bryce Young currently in my rankings. So that's like my cutoff. Anyone after Tua, I would go with the rookie.
Daniel Jones or Will Levis?
Daniel Jones. I have Will Levis. I'll let you go more names. That's more fun before I tell you where I have him.
All right, Will Levis or, so you went Daniel Jones, Trey Lance.
I have Levis like right. I have the Niners situation. I have like Purdy, Lance, Darnold. I hate the Niners quarterback situation right now, but I don't believe in Trey Lance. So I think even though I have Levis after him in my rankings, I'm going to go Levis.
I would,
depending on where he goes
Levis.
too, JB. I think I think some team is going to invest in him. And I think I have a starting quarterback who's going to get a chance over his first contract, where I think Lance is going to falter. So I probably should be bumping Levis up in my rankings a notch or two.
All right, let's change this up a little bit. Lawrence or Stroud? No, wait, sorry. I keep forgetting Young is your quarterback one. Lawrence or Young?
I love Trevor Lawrence, man.
All right.
Trevor's way up there on me. He's ahead of Tua, ahead of Dak.
Lamar Jackson or Young?
Lamar Jackson. I have him right in that Trevor right tier.
Justin Fields or
he'll get a contract, JB. He'll get a contract. Sorry.
Justin Fields or Bryce Young?
Justin Fields.
Bryce Young or Kyler Murray?
This is where my hatred for the Cardinals and the whole Kyler situation, I'd rather the draft pick. I'll go with Bryce.
All right. And then you said Dak over Bryce Young, right?
I did.
And then Deshaun Watson or Bryce Young?
Bryce Young. I have Deshaun right after Bryce.
All right. Now, how far down do we switch that up if we're talking about CJ Stroud? Tua? After Tua for you?
Oh, yeah.
So Daniel Jones or Stroud?
I have Danny Dimes right now. It's close.
We need to talk about this off the air. We need to have a serious conversation. You talk about you having to come out to Pittsburgh. We need to meet somewhere, and we need to talk about this immediately.
I like the direction of that Giants offense.
All right. Would you go Richardson or Daniel Jones?
I have Richardson and Stroud like right next to each other. So either one I would. And I'm probably a hypocrite, JB, because the upside of Richardson could so surpass them. I'm looking through the lens right now of a lot of my dynasty rosters are contending teams. I've traded most of my draft capital, JB, so I don't even have a chance of getting, other than maybe one or two leagues, these guys. I will do a startup after the draft. And then I think when we get to startup point, JB, I probably would take Richardson or Stroud over. But they would probably go before I even could take them. And then I end up with Daniel Jones, normally knowing the way I construct my rosters.
Yeah. Okay. And then is there any thought that crosses your mind with Jared Goff, Kenny Pickett, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson?
They're all right next to them. And again, contending rosters, I'm looking right now. I'm very happy to have any of those veterans that you named to lead my team for 3 years, maybe. So
now,
but in Dynasty, no one wants those guys.
No,
they do want Stroud or Richardson and the potential of them. So I know I could get something for them. So if I'm giving the Dynasty listeners advice, I mean, you probably should go after a Stroud or Richardson before Goff, Dimes, Cousins, Geno, probably Pickett, Carr, Russell.
The fact that we're throwing the word probably in there, I'm fascinated.
I want to win money.
I'm fascinated right now. And again,
I had very good ROI last year, JB.
I know
I'm riding that ROI. You know?
I'll tell you where to shove that ROI in a second here, but keep it family friendly here. Very
warm
quickly,
and fuzzy. John is gone. He's gone for 59 minutes into the show.
Very quickly. So you got your 101, you got your 102 locked up. Who's 103 for you right now?
It's Stroud.
So we're talking about Daniel Jones up there with the 103 for you.
Based on production for the next 3 years and wanting to win now, like if I have Danny Jones on my roster, and I do on a couple leagues, I'm going to ride him.
So if I offered you, hypothetically, if I were to offer you the 103 for your Daniel Jones, you would answer that phone.
Problem is I don't have a 103 in most of my leagues, so that's I'm from that perspective of contending. But if you offer me that 103, I would give you Daniel Jones.
Okay, so then is it fair to say at their respective prices, you would prefer Daniel Jones then?
At their respective prices. That's a good way to word it.
Okay. Guys, don't worry. I think we talked some sense into him. We can wrap up the show now.
Final thoughts.
Dan, episode 198. Next week, action-packed. We're going to try to keep it to an hour. Wide receivers and tight ends. Dan, myself, and Mitch, we're going to be here on Wednesday. Next Tuesday is my wife's birthday. Try not to spend it in the doghouse, if you will. So we got episode 199 next Wednesday, 9:00 Eastern. Episode 200 the following week. That's going to be our rookie mock draft, pre-NFL draft.
Awesome.
All right, Dan, that lined up very nicely. What do you got for our listeners here?
I don't even know where to start, but like for our listeners, I think as you go through tonight's episode, and I think it's really important to know there's a lot of different scenarios, whether you've got a contending team, a rebuilding team, whether you're doing a startup, and I look through things from a different lens. But John, that ROI, man, I'm just saying, don't discount these grizzled vets that still have a good contract in them. But dynasty value wise, to AJ's points in the comments, it does feel gross. So I would take those 103s. Look forward to next week, JB, diving into wide receivers. A lot of big plans. I'm off to New York Rangers game Monday night too. I know that was part of, we were juggling nights there. Really stoked taking my son first time at a Rangers game. Going to be a blast, but can't wait for next week.
Yeah, you're like a resident New Yorker these days.
I don't know what's going on. We're going to meet Adam Graves, who was on their Stanley Cup championship game team before the game, which is going to be pretty cool. So we'll post that out there. And JB, before the episode, we says, is it going to be an hour tonight? We had like 5 quarterbacks to cover and no Mitch on the show, and we still went over.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun episode. Obviously, we could talk for days. But hopefully everybody enjoyed the show. And like Dan said, my final thought here very quickly, there are so many scenarios and so many situations. And I threw that blanket question to Dan. Hey, would you rather move off one of these picks or draft a quarterback? The beauty of our Dynasty Theory Patreon/Discord is we can take the time and run through every single scenario you got. Any question, any thought. It isn't just questions. It's people sharing their thoughts and everybody bouncing ideas off of each other. And that's why it's so fantastic. But through that, we're able to get through 1,000,001 different scenarios as opposed to a quick little blurb, a quick hitter here on the episode. So hopefully you all enjoyed it. For Dan Lamagna, he's not with us tonight, but Mitch Sorensen, I'm John Bauer. We'll catch everybody next week.